It's Julie from So Creative, and I'm about to do our first virtual monthly Kimberbell Club. And it's going to be the Get Well Soon gift pocket. These are cute, fun. I've changed the supplies a little bit. The supplies call for felt. We're going to be doing our gift pockets with cork, because if you can do it with cork, why wouldn't you do it with cork? So you want to get all your prep work done from your directions. Cut your cork or your fabric, whatever you're using, the specified amount. If you're using the cork instead of the felt, instead of cutting two 6x9 pieces, you're going to cut three 6x9 pieces, and that'll be evident when we get to that point. I'll show you why. First thing we're going to do is remove the plastic covering off the glitter vinyl. We will have kits available for this. The kits are going to be $11.75, and that's going to include the cork and the glitter vinyl, the piece of fabric. It will not, of course, include your threads. And you just set your glitter vinyl aside. I hope you can see me. The threads that I'm going to use for this one are, I'm going to be using, let's see, I have the dark color blue I'm using is bright blue. Then I'm going to be using light turquoise, candy apple red, purple rose, and pink. Now, I hope you can see my screen. I have hooped, in my 5x7 hoop, I have hooped tearaway stabilizer, and I've brought my design up on my screen here, which you cannot see. Let me just turn this a little bit so you can see it. Brought it up on the screen. I'm going to go into embroidery, and I'm going to stitch my first step one, which is the placement stitch for my first piece of cork. And go ahead and stitch that. The next thing I'm going to do is place my cork over my placement stitch, completely covering the placement stitch. I hope everyone is staying well and staying sane. Then I'm going to go ahead and stitch that. Normally when you do this, you would use the Kimberbell tape, but because this is quite a bit oversized, I'm just going to steady it. Then I'm going to trim. I've got my handy dandy VP 45s. Everyone knows these are my favorite scissors for trimming. You want to trim nice and close to your stitch line. And I don't think I got quite close enough. So what I'm going to do is just get a little bit closer. You want to be very careful that you don't clip your actual stitches, but I like to get right up there because there's going to be a satin stitch over this, and I don't want my cork to show. The great thing about using cork in a project like this instead of the felt is you can leave the edges raw. So for the back of it, that's why we're going to sew the two pieces of cork instead of one. Alrighty. And see, I got nice and close. Then I'm going to put my hoop back into my machine. And I am going to stitch the background placement line. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my background piece of fabric, and if it's directional, you want to pay attention to the direction that the fabric is going. Ask me how I know this. How many times have I ever put the fabric on the wrong side together? You know, I'm going to make a suggestion that you prior when you're prepping your fabric, that you iron on some SF101 to your background fabric. It's just going to give it some nice body, and it'll just make the stitching come out better. And I'm just going to turn you just a little bit so you can see where I have my little mini iron set up over here and my wool pressing mat. I like to keep this right by my sewing machine at home. And here it's very handy. That way if you're doing an applique or anything like that, you got it right next to you. So handy. And I love, love, love the wool pressing mat. I have a different one by each one of my machines, and a little mini iron by them because I'm spoiled, I admit it. But it gets so hot and it's just perfect. So I think that's the only thing I'm going to have to iron right now. So I'm going to turn my iron off. All right, I'm going to turn you again so you can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to move my chair. Ooh, what is going on? Okay. All right. There we go. So now what I'm going to do is I've stitched my placement line for my background fabric. I'm going to go ahead and cover that completely with my fabric, making sure that if it's directional fabric, it is facing the right way. And I'm going ahead and stitching my tack down stitch. Now I don't want you to go ahead and trim this fabric after it's done stitching. This is not the time that we're going to stitch it. And it tells you all this in the directions, of course. The next step is I'm going to stitch the placement line for my foam for my Band-Aid. Got my handy dandy foam right here. Then I'm going to place my foam, and I'm going to use my Kimberbell tape. I love the Kimberbell tape. It has just the right amount of stickiness. Not too sticky, but sticky enough. And I'm going to change my thread to the thread that matches my glitter vinyl. That's the one I chose the purple rose for. And everyone knows how I'm always telling you, you snip your thread up at the top and then pull it through the tensions correctly. It adds life to your machine. You want to keep things going properly through the machine. If you've taken classes from me before, you know I harp on it all the time. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch my tack down for my foam. I'm going to remove my hoop from the machine, and I'm going to trim around the foam. Again, using my favorite scissors. You want to trim nice and close to your stitches, just like we did with the cork. All right, see, nice and close. Slide the hoop back into the machine. And now it's time to stitch the placement stitch for my glitter vinyl. If you had not changed your thread color up till this point, if you had left the blue on or whatever color you're using, now would be the time that you want to change it to the color that's going to match your glitter vinyl, because these stitches are going to show, okay? Now I'm going to place my glitter vinyl, glitter side up over the top of the placement stitches, and I'm going to tape it in place. You may have noticed I did save the tape. You can reuse this tape a couple times during a project, as long as it doesn't stick onto itself. I'm just going to tear it and tape it on all sides. It is sticky. Now, if you were to sew over this tape, you can still get the tape off. You shouldn't be concerned about that. It's stitching the tack down for the glitter vinyl right now. Now, if you wanted the inner stitches to pop up a little bit more, you could change the color of your thread. I want it to blend, so now I'm going to go ahead and stitch the stitches on the inside where the foam is. Now's the time I'm going to remove the hoop, and I'm going to remove my tape, and I'm going to trim around the Band-Aid. Now this is a raw edge applique, so you will not be having a stitch covering the edge of the Band-Aid. And you want to trim about 1/8 of an inch away from the stitch line. And there we go. Next, we're going to change our threads to stitch the larger heart. I went traditional, and I've chosen to use the candy apple red. And I'm going to go ahead and stitch my heart. Now that this is done, I'm going to go ahead and change my thread again, and I'm going to change it to pink, so I'm going with red and pink hearts. Again, I'm clipping my thread from the top, pulling it through the tensions the appropriate way. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stitch the small heart. Okay, now that this is done, I'm going to give you a little tip. This is just a personal preference on my part. When I'm doing lettering, I prefer to match my bobbin thread to my top thread, because sometimes when in lettering, it's so dense that the thread, your bobbin thread might pull up. And I don't like to take that risk, so I just match my bobbin thread to my top thread. So that's my suggestion to you all, that you change your bobbin thread now to match your top thread, which is going to be our blue. So I'm just going to slip my hoop out. Easy peasy, change my bobbin. And I'll change it back after I finish this for lettering. Put my hoop back in the machine, and we're good to go. Off to the races. Okay, now that that's done, I'm going to remove the hoop from the machine, and I'm going to trim around the background fabric. Again, remember to trim nice and close to those stitches without cutting the stitches, okay? So now I'm going to slip the hoop back into the machine. Right now we are on machine step 13, and we're going to be stitching the satin stitch around the background fabric. Okay, so our next color is going to be the top stitching over the top of the decorative, the satin stitch that we just stitched. So I'm going to go ahead and put my thread and put my light turquoise in. I did forget, there's also one other thread color that we'll be needing, and it's cork. These are all glide thread colors because we prefer, that's our preferred thread in the store. Now this is going to stitch the decorative top stitching over the top of the satin stitch. Now I've changed it a little bit. I am going to not put the ribbon on, which is instruction step 26 through 29. So I am leaving that off. If you all want to put the ribbon on and attach the little tube, that's great. You go right ahead. I just didn't feel like doing that. So now I am going to skip ahead to instruction step 30 and machine step 17, which is going to be removing the hoop from the machine and attaching the cork to the back of it, of the thing, and of the project, I'm sorry, and we're going to be taping it. We're also going to change the thread to cork now. So what you want to make sure you do is take your remaining 2 pieces of cork and put them wrong sides together, and then tape them to the back like that. You want to completely cover the placement line on the back of the hoop, and I would be generous with the tape because you're taping 2 layers of cork and you really do not want that to shift. Nothing is more infuriating than when the back of your project shifts. Okay, so once you have your cork taped to the back, all nice and secure, you're going to slide your hoop back into your machine. If you're doing this my way, make sure that you advance, as I did, to the appropriate stitch out, and go ahead and stitch it. Now I'm going to remove the hoop from the machine, and I'm going over to my cutting table, and I'm going to trim all around the last stitch mark 1/8 of an inch, and I'll be right back. First, before I do that, I'm going to remove the tearaway stabilizer. So I'm going to pop this out of the hoop. Remove my tape. I'm going to remove my excess tearaway stabilizer. As you can see, I've removed my tearaway stabilizer from around my project. Now I'm going over to my cutting table, and I'm going to trim all around the outside edge here 1/8 of an inch, and I'll be right back. Through the magic of editing, I now have a finished project. How cute is this? And you can just give it to put some candy bars in it, put Band-Aids in it, whatever you want to put in it, a little card, a gift card, and give it to somebody. And how cute is that? Now let me show you the other one, because you have options. This design has 2 separate this month has 2 separate designs, and this is thinking of you. You could do a cute little sewing gift to a friend who's stuck in the house with COVID. But great, fun, easy to do, and so fun. And people appreciate these things so much. So here they are. And thanks for listening. And give me a call if you have any questions. And again, the kits are $11.75. Just call ahead and let me know if you want one. Thanks. Bye.